Today, our seminar will be discussed on Confucianism and Nusantara worldview. Our seminar is to review on the previous articles and review articles by the scholars. We would like to welcome upon Dr. Rivani as well as his presentation on writing journal articles, the 7 imperatives. Welcome, Dr. Rivani.
All right, thank you. Thank you, sir. All right. I can still see her. All right. All right, thank you everyone for attending this workshop. This workshop has two parts mainly. So one is the Confucianism and Malay worldview. The other one, which is also the focus of this workshop, which is a student peer-to-peer journal article review. So my presentation today will be focusing more on the journal article. So I'll be sharing with you 7 imperatives on writing journal articles. Right? So we are in an academic world, so to say. Yeah, we are in a university. We write and we publish. We research. We share our findings, and increasingly it has become important not just for lecturers, professors, academics to write, but also students, right? It has become a requirement for postgraduate students, and more it will become important as well for undergraduates to have publications, right? So the earlier you start this process of understanding publishing journal articles, not just article, the better it is. And it has become a challenge, not just for students, but also for lecturers to publish in journal articles, right? To write alone is a challenge, right? It's also a big task, let alone to publish a good quality writing. So what I will present to you is a guide, a salient points on writing journal articles, right? So let me share with you the first slide, right? So before we write, before we decide to send in our articles, our writing, our research findings to journals, right? For us, especially in the non-Western world, it is important to have the bigger perspective of writing, of the knowledge world, right? So the first salient point, the first imperative is the idea of hegemony, which means the control, the monopoly, maybe not monopoly, but the dominance of a certain segment of the world towards the rest of the world. So what we have right now in the world of knowledge is hegemony of knowledge. What do we mean by this?
Let me hit this.
It's okay, you can discuss. What do I mean with this? It means that the way we perceive knowledge, the way we construct knowledge, the way we process knowledge, the way we interpret knowledge, often falls under a certain paradigm or paradigms, right? A certain perspective or worldview, right? And this perspective or paradigm of understanding, of defining, of researching knowledge is often dominated by a Western hegemony. How we define identity, how we define economy, how we define politics, how we define the family. The Western episteme, the Western way of understanding the world has dominated the world. So much so that we use their language to describe ourselves. We use their language to understand our culture. We use their lenses, their perspectives to analyze, to investigate, to research on the problems of our society. So they have this hegemony, this domination of knowledge, how we construct knowledge, how we interpret knowledge, what we see and what we do not see, right? And I often quote this example, terrorism, for instance, right? They often define terrorism as state terrorism. Individual organizational terrorism, right? So it often goes back to the individual or to the group, but they run away from the concept of state terrorism, where the state terrorizes other countries, other groups of people. And we know the biggest terrorists are not the small little organizations or the transnational groups, right? When we talk about the militant, it's state terrorism. The country that has bombed, has dropped nuclear bomb to other countries is United States, right? So United States is the biggest terrorist in the world, right? It has gone into all other, not all other countries, many countries, right? And terrorize people, right? And people are fearful of that kind of terrorism. So the way we define terrorism, the way we define economic growth is very much defined by the Western perspective. So this is what we talk about hegemony of knowledge. So when we start writing, start researching, start understanding what we want to write, we need to understand that there is that part of knowledge, a big part of knowledge that has been colonized, has been hegemonized, right, has been controlled by this Western construct, right? We as students, writers from the developing world especially, or the non-Western world, right, need to understand that maybe there are other ways of looking at reality. Maybe there are other ways of looking at culture. Maybe there's other ways of looking at economy. Maybe there are other ways of looking at well-being and environment, right? Hence the relevance of what we want to discuss today, Confucianism and the Malay worldview, right? Uh, the Chinese tradition is not just decades, not just centuries, but more than thousands of years, right? So there's this knowledge, reservoir of knowledge that we can tap into and understand the world, right? From the Chinese tradition. Likewise, the Malay worldview as well. So it is the Nusantara Malay archipelago is a civilization of civilizations. There are many civilizations that dated back even before prehistoric times. But we often look at the world from the Western lenses. So here is where we're going to have a workshop that is critical. It is critical of how we often look at the world, right? So we are combining a workshop about writing articles together with a workshop about being critical of how we write and how we publish, right? So that's hegemony of knowledge. We also have hegemony of knowledge institutions. So knowledge institutions right now, right, from the journals that we want to publish, right, to the institutions of knowledge, right? How universities are being ranked, evaluated, is also based on hegemony, right? The Western hegemony has decided how to rank universities. The Western hegemony of knowledge institution has decided what journals are good, what journals are not good. Hence, we have the idea of scopus, Q1, Q2, Q3, high impact, impact factor. Those are Western concoction, that Western creation. These are knowledge institutions that certify, that come up with standards of what's good and what's not good. So we need to understand that if we publish, yes, we want to publish in good journals, but in the process, do not forget that sometimes, perhaps many times, we also want to fight for our journals, right? Fight for our knowledge institutions, but that might not have the certification, the ranking, the standards of the West. But if we do not fight for our own journals and knowledge institutions, right, we all will support their knowledge institutions. They will support their hegemony. So it's good that China, for instance, now is coming as a contesting force to United States, as a political, economic, even cultural power in the world arena, right? So offering different alternative paradigms to how we can see, how we can interpret, how we can move as this such this this what is it this a world of different cultures, different communities. So this is the first salient point or the first imperative that I would like to highlight before we even write, to understand that we are writing in the context of hegemony, and that we should not be blindsided, right, by the hegemony that is covering, controlling the world, basically, right? So that's the first imperative. That's the first salient point. Number two, the rationale of writing. Rationale writing is the reason, the motivation of writing, right? Impact or impact factor. So if you talk about journals, right? Journals have impact factor. You can look it up and you know different journals have different impact factor. And academics like to talk about impact factor of journals. So when you want to publish, you can look at the impact factor of journals, see whether it's high impact factor or low impact factor. But impact factor doesn't mean impact, right? Sometimes articles that are published in newspapers have more impact than articles with high impact factor, because high impact factor articles might be read only by few people, right? Not many people will read journals, right? And how many more people will read specialized journals, right? But a lot more people will read newspapers, for instance, right? Or some write-ups or some conversations or dialogues you have in the form of that is being uploaded in social media might have more impact, right? So when we write, we need to understand about impact and impact factor, right? Now, does it mean that can it be both? That we write for both impact and impact factor? The answer is yes. Yeah, you can write both for impact and impact factor, but seldom that is the case. Is it wrong? It sounds like I'm saying that we should discard the idea of writing for impact factor journals. It is not wrong, right? Because we are in a world where articles are being evaluated based on impact factor. Right? And we are in that world. We are in the world of karate. We are in the world of taekwondo. So we've got to play according to the rules of karate, according to the rules of taekwondo. Otherwise, we won't win the fight. So we need to continue to play the game that is being set up, but understand that we can create other games as well, right? We can have our own martial arts as well. We can have our own Yong Chun. We can have our own Silat, our own style as well, and we can create our own world as well. So the debate right now, especially in this part of the world, right? Oftentimes we are critical of this impact factor, critical of high impact journals and all that. But at the same time, we need to be able to embrace what needs to be done, right? And not to be immersed and drowned by this game. We know this is the game, and we know that we can create other games, and we know we need to fight this fight, right? Because they designed the fight and they are still controlling the fight. Right? Until and unless we can create different games, we've got to play this game until we win, or until we create alternative games and win in that game as well. So it can be both, the answer is, and we should be doing both. As for postgraduate students, right, you will need to write in journals that are recognized by the university as well. So we are in that game, right? So that's the rationale of writing. Now, we can talk about the impact as well. So when we carry out research, we have something in our mind that we want to share, right? Regardless of the type of journals that we want to publish, you want to be able to share your thoughts. So there are times that you will want to be sharing your thoughts even though it is not in journals, right? In not established journals. So the point I'm putting forth to you is that in our rational writing, we should not have this inner civil war inside our mind to support them or not to support. We do both. We do both because we are in that game, but we understand that we should also share our knowledge, right? So we have that clarity of intention in our mind, not to be clouded by either side, right? So that's the rationale of writing. That's point number two. Point number three, research conversations. This is true especially uh, when you're carrying out a research. It can be applicable for undergraduates, masters, and PhD. Uh, and oftentimes this has not been well understood by a lot of writers. Yeah? I happen to be editor in chief of one of the journals out there. A lot of people who submit their articles do not understand that their research or what they are writing about exists in a theoretical conversation. Right? There's a theoretical conversation about what you're researching on, right? If you're talking about happiness, there are theories about happiness, there are research about happiness, right? And there's a conversation between articles, between writers, between theories, right? And you will need to understand this conversation, this dialogue, right? So hence the idea of literature review. Right? So you do this literature review, you carry out literature review to know this conversation that where did this idea of development, for instance, you're studying development, when did this development start, right? Who articulated this idea of development the way we understand development now? And we see the conversations, the scholars, the debates of development, and you say, oh, this is what development means. International relations. Who come up with this idea? International relations, right? When they come up, when they exist, right? And what is the dialogue of international relations, right? Now we are talking about world politics sometimes, shifting international relations to something much more global, for instance. So you need to understand the theoretical space, the dialogue that exists, and then research positioning and research contestation. So in this space, in this conversation, in this dialogue, right, with different voices, you need to understand your position in this whole dialogue. Where do you stand? Where do you position yourself? Are you in support of a particular theory? Are you disagreeing with this theory, or are you saying that this theory is good, but there are certain blind spots, there are certain weaknesses that you want to improve, challenge, contribute? Right? So you need to know where your positioning is, where you stand in this dialogue, in this community of thinkers, communities of knowledge creators, so to say. Yeah? And the research contestation. So they are not just dialogue. Oftentimes they are also contestation. You say, my theory, this is their theory, there's different theories or paradigms, right? To understand the reality. So in international relations, you talk about realism, liberalism, constructivism. It is a different way to understand reality, right? So where do you stand? And how are you participating? How are you contributing to this contestation, right? So if you understand that context, so you will write the article with the understanding of what the conversation is, what the dialogue is, what the literature is, right? And you understand where you stand in this whole dialogue, right? Where you stand in this whole conversation, this whole body of knowledge, right? So this is the research conversation. So we are entering the conversation as well. So we are contributing the conversation, right? So number four, the vacuum. The fourth imperative is the vacuum. What is it? So after understanding the theoretical conversation, the community of knowledge, right? Community of scholars, the conversations, you want to be able to ask, what is the theoretical gap? What is the Some people call it research gap, right? But I would raise it higher to a theoretical gap. What is not being explained? What is lacking in this conversation, right? What has not been resolved in this dialogue, right? So you understand the gap, you understand the vacuum, right? There's a vacuum there, and as you come and say, what is the contribution to knowledge? What is your contribution to knowledge? So your research should be able to contribute to knowledge, right? So your write up about your contribution of knowledge will help to fill in this gap. To say that, well, after reading the literature, there are mainly 3, 4 groups of thinkers or 3, 4 groups of contesting ideas, and this is where I stand, and this is where I will contribute to this gap, to the part that is not being explained by the current literature yet. But so this approach of first having the understanding of the hegemony, the other one is understanding the rationale of writing, the third is actually to understand the idea of conversations within the knowledge community, and then you go in and say, okay, this is how I want to contribute. To contribute is to understand the vacuum. Right? So what happened is sometimes some articles, right, are doing the same thing of what other people are doing. So it gets rejected, right? It's basically say, well, this research it has been done in Hong Kong, in Sulawesi, but has not been done in Kuala Lumpur yet. So I'm carrying out this research in Kuala Lumpur. It's basically filling up the empirical gap. That's not the theoretical gap. But if you say that this research, by carrying out this research in Kuala Lumpur, we discover that there are new frontiers, new areas that the existing literature, the existing theories cannot be explained. Now that is contribution to knowledge. So that is what we want to do, right? As opposed to just carry out research, write, and trying to publish, right? So it is not new. The idea of journal articles, especially good journals, right? They will want to have something new. So contribution to knowledge is a vacuum. Otherwise, your people say ABC, you say ABC. People say DF, you say DF. It's a repetition of knowledge. It's not contribution of knowledge, right? That is the difference. And you want to be able to say, well, ABC, but A actually has A.1, A.2. That's extending the theory, right? Or you say, well, it's not A, it's actually F. That's challenging the theory, right? Or you say A doesn't sound A it actually sounds like right? All this while I thought A is A, but A is actually because the social actors, the people interpret it as and it's not A. Right? So this is different ways of contributing to the knowledge, right? Of course, another one is the methodological vacuum. People have researched the problem, but people have not researched the problem in a particular methodological approach. So you say this is a new contribution using a different methodology. So that is also a kind of contribution to knowledge, right? We can deal with the vacuum in a separate workshop, something seminar. Yeah, I can discuss further on that one. So this is the fourth one, right? There are 7. Number 5, best fit. The fifth imperative is that the article must fit the journal, right? Is there a fit between the article and the journal, right? Is that match, right? What does it mean? What is the editorial philosophy, right? Sometimes some journals only accept articles with empirical data. They do not accept conceptual articles. All right? If the article only talks about concepts or reconstructing concepts, they do not accept. They accept only articles with findings, with empirical data, which means they collect data and they present the data. There are also journals that accept only quantitative data, quantitative research. Right? So you need to know, or you also need to know the paradigm or ideological orientation. So sometimes journals might have only might have certain perspective. They tend to be critical social science perspective. So if you go in offering a non-critical social science perspective, it's harder to get in. Right? It's not that you cannot get in, but it's harder to get in. It's against the editorial philosophy. Although sometimes, many times, they do not disclose what the editorial philosophy is, but sometimes they do. But you need to be able to know, oh, this is journal from the left, this is journal from the right, right? So they have their own political orientation, so to say, ideological orientation, right? Or this is Keynesian economics journal. This is a journal that promotes realism rather than constructivism, right? So you will need to be able to assess, right, to see the ideological or the paradigm fit, right, between what you want to do and what the journal wants to accept, right? So this is one of the most common line of rejection. Your article is valuable, but it is best placed in other journals, right? It's a good write-up, it is a good finding, but it is not meant for our journal. This is one of the lines that the editors like to give, right? Almost like a copy and paste, right? So this has to do with the whether it fits or matches the paradigm or the orientation or the requirements or the philosophy of the journal or the editorial journal, right? Uh, and at the okay, I'll go back to this, which is linked to point number 5. Right? Point number 6 is linked to point number 5 to some extent. The who factor. Who factor is oftentimes people don't talk about it, right? Oftentimes, most of the time, almost always people don't talk about it. But this is almost like a little secret, but it's an important little secret. The who factor sometimes determine or helps you to publish in journals, right? What is it? E. So the EBF, right? E. Check on the editor's work or the subject editor's writings, right? What does it mean? You go to the website or the journal, right? You see who the editor-in-chief is or who the subject editors are, right? So it might be, might accept different themes or fields, and you go to that because the editor-in-chief, right? For me, for instance, I do not review articles, right? I will pass to the subject editor or the field editor. The field editor will actually find other reviewers to do it. Right? That's how the editorial system works. Right? So the field editor or the subject editor, right? Oftentimes they also publish. Right? So you go to the subject editor or the field editor, right? Or see what he or she has published and cite him or her or them. So when he sees or she sees, oh, my work is in this article, right? Okay, the person is aligned to my thinking. Or by the way, if my work is in there, I'm being cited, right? So he or she will find relevance to the field because he or her, and this is a little secret, but I'm a sociologist, and we know the sociology of publication, right? So there's a social dynamics to publication as well. So there's, okay, I will submit this to the reviewer. Or you do want to, you want it to continue the process, not to stop the process, right? But whenever you see the person sees his or her name, is okay, this is relevant, go. So this is one good strategy to link with to cite the editor, the editor-in-chief or the subject editor, right? So make sure your research involves this one. So you're publishing something, look at the editorial board. So you understand the persons, or usually the persons, more than one person, right? So inside the person. And sometimes in some journals, right, they will require you to cite from the journal because they want to increase the rating of the journal as well. Now it's like a game again, it's a hegemony of knowledge institutions, right? So you want to cite the journal So you'll be able to cite a journal or whatever. You read this, you find some articles that are relevant to your article and cite the article from the same journal. You cite it, right? So that actually helps. Number B, who are the big names? So if you're researching on culture, on Asian culture, on the Malay culture, you got to know who the big names are, right? And you need to be able to put the big names uh, in your paper. It's like if you're doing philosophy, you do not quote John Rawls, right? And it's one of the one of the biggest philosophers around, modern philosophy, right? They say something wrong with your literature review. So you need to have big names. So the main theories of the field, right, should be cited in there as well. So you need to know who the big names are. Put the big names worked in your reference and in your literature review. So the big names, as in the big scholars, right? Now, so EBF, that's B. So F, established figures as co-authors. Um, this is interesting. If I'm not mistaken, there's this guy named Jeffrey Sachs. Jeffrey Sachs, Sachs. He's a very well-known economist. So he tested journals. He wrote with a different name, not his name, right? And then he sent to publication, right? They rejected his work. He rejected his article. And by the way, he's a big name. He's like advisor to president, Malaysian prime minister has communicated with him long time ago. He's a big name until now, right? But his article has been rejected. Has been rejected. But when he put his real name, automatically the article is being accepted because he's a big name, right? Because people know him. Right? Oh, who doesn't want Jeffrey Sachs' article? You're stupid or not? Right? You're not even half of him to reject his article. So big names carry weight, right? Even though they say something stupid, people will still publish it. People will still publish it. Yeah. Now, he scaled it down a bit, right? Maybe you do not know big names to co-author with you, but sometimes the world of publication is small. It's a small world. The world publication in your particular field is even small world. They tend to know each other, right? So when I see somebody writing, I say, okay, I know this guy. This guy is from this university. This guy, the other day I met him and have tea with him. And he's in the conference. I met him. So I see the name. I recognize him or her, and immediately I say, "Oh, it's something worthy for me to look into." Right? Make it much smoother for it to be processed and published. So putting in not necessarily the biggest name, right? Biggest authors, right? Somebody in your field, in your geography, right? In your country, right? Who's willing to co-author with it. Might not be the main author, but they can be co-author. Sometimes, many times help as well. So this is the who factor, right? The who factor from the editor to the big name, big theories in the field, to the not so big theory, but big enough in your world, right? So it's like anthropologist in Malaysia, it is Samsul Bahari, is the Professor Ulung, Professor Samsul Bahari. So that is a sixth factor. The seventh imperative, novelty. What is new about this article? What's original? What's special about this article that should be? So the idea of new novelty should be highlighted in the abstract itself, right? My phone was in the abstract itself. It should be highlighted in the abstract. It should be repeated in the conclusion. So it is something that you want to make your work stand out and stand out immediately in the write-up. Yeah? So perhaps a new interpretation, perhaps a new perspective, some meaningful findings, right? I published one article about, who are you happy working in Penang? It's about migrant workers. We found out that our whole premise of asking that question was wrong. It's not happiness that they pursue. they're pursuing some other higher level of emotions, right? Which is familiar giving and the shukr, spiritual gratitude. So there's something more meaningful in our findings, and that was something you highlighted. Right? There's the idea of the highest state of emotion. It's not happiness for migrant workers. It's not important for them to be happy. I mean, they like to be happy, but they are migrant workers. Yeah? So for them, higher level of fulfillment is about giving back or giving to their family, yeah? Or the spiritual gratitude, the shukr, the feeling of gratitude to gratitude of God, so that they have ways of churning out, generating income. So this is uh, the part that you can highlight what is meaningful in your research and what is novel, what is original, what's new in your research, and you want to highlight it early and preferably make it, preferably not necessarily, preferably make it part of your journal title. Right? So and it will catch the eyes of the editors and the sub-editors and field editors immediately. Okay, so I think that's the last slide. Okay, all right. Terima kasih. All right. Thank you. Assalamualaikum.